Today we're going to cover some insight on human behavioral styles and the motivators behind them. This is a reach out to acknowledge how we can reduce stress in our lives. It's getting our toes wet just a bit into understanding human behaviors and how to reduce the stress in our lives by changing our expectations of how others should behave, think, and act. Enjoy. Thanks for listening. If you like the candid discussion and are seeking the truth behind the mainstream narrative, then please subscribe and share. Not only am I grateful, but those who seek the truth and wish to empower themselves and their family's health, freedoms, and future will also be grateful. As we interact in the world, we tend to see reality not as it is, but through our eyes. And why this is important is that many of us go through life expecting people to behave a certain way, either expecting them to react to things the way we do, have the same feelings, the same values, have the same response, or at least value what we value. And that expectation is a subtle difference because now we attach to how comfortable we feel by whether or not they think like us or act like us or look like us or talk like us. And the bottom line is this. We struggle in life when we cannot adapt and respect and understand how others' values are different than ours and why that's perfectly okay and why that's actually the real experience in life is that difference. They have the right to all of that, just like you have the right to all that. So where did this come from? This weekend I was blessed with the opportunity to speak and train with some great chiropractors. And one of the things we talked about that I was asked to speak about is some of the training that I've had in the DISC behavioral assessments. So back in 1996, I was first assessed when I was studying and coaching with one of my mentors. And when I received my assessment back, I was completely distraught, upset, very resistant as to what it actually showed me. And what it showed me was how I was being perceived by others. And even though that doesn't mean everyone. That means others as in based on their styles and their behavioral styles. By the way, not personality, but behavior. Okay, behavior is predictable when we are stressed. So this isn't Myers-Briggs. This isn't the Enneagram. And there's great testing instruments out there. But what I loved about the DISC assessment, which was the universal language, was the depth and the simplicity at the same time, because it didn't categorize people. And so where this comes up is connecting, interacting, and communicating. And when we communicate with others, many times it's before a word is even said, right? It's before we speak because our attitude is showing. And it can show up in facial expressions. It can show up in our eyes, our cheeks, facial muscles, the whole synchronous movements of all the muscle activity that connote an expression, all right? So the conversation this weekend was, how do we help doctors, specifically in this case, communicate with their patients more clearly and adapt a message that suits the person in front of them? Because if we respect the fact that everyone has different styles and different styles of behavior and different preferences of communication, then we can alter how we speak so that the message can get heard. How many times have you tried to have a conversation with somebody and you just feel like you're kind of butting heads, like it's not going anywhere, or there's resistance, or they're just not receptive? Or a conversation where I'll give you a few examples where you're speaking to someone on the phone and the answers on the other end are brief, turt, and concise. Okay, they're closed questions. How you doing today? Great. Silence. That behavioral style might frustrate you because you have to feel like you're doing all the speaking, which I spoke to some docs about this weekend. And that would frustrate them, which means they would carry that into the conversation. That would be the energy. And then they didn't know because that's how they saw the world. That's how they communicated. They can't understand why someone on the other side of the other end wouldn't communicate like they do. That is a very small world because now we're restricted to only the people that see things and feel things and behave and communicate like we do. So you see the conundrum in today's society that when we have an expectation, where the divisiveness that goes on is partially due to, there's many factors, but one particular thing that we can improve on, which is why I'm presenting this, is that if we understood first more about ourselves and our own style of behavior, our own behavioral values. So behavior is how we communicate, all right? And then there's values behind that. We all have unique values, and we place value in these areas where we place a value on based on our experiences. What's important to me? Why am I driven and motivated in this direction? For example, just being transparent, one of my visions is I feel like chiropractic as a holistic health, or let's just say any natural health care, is of huge value. Not only huge value, it's essential for the evolution, the continued development of humankind, because it empowers individuals to be responsible and accountable in their own experience in their own health care. Like, I can't do exercises for you. You can't do them for me. It's my responsibility. I can't place good food in your mouth. You have to do that. Same thing with me. I'm in charge of my mental capacity. I'm in charge of what I watch, whether I watch the news, whether I watch a channel specifically. I'm in charge of what books I read. I'm in charge of how I communicate. I'm in charge and responsible for me and my behavior. All right? So when we look at the self-responsibility of that, and we understand that my behavior is perceived in society by certain different types in different ways. So if I'm very direct and I'm also extroverted and I'm very experiential and chatty or conversational, I might feel that when I'm in a room of someone who's more amiable and introverted or analytical, that I'm the only one speaking, and that maybe to them I appear overzealous or loud or obnoxious or flippant or disrespectful or pushy. So if I'm not aware that everyone's not like me, then I'll just go through life experiencing and thinking or feeling that I have to do all the talking, or that in order to get something done, it has to be me, or I have to be louder than someone else, or I have to be the conversationalist, or I'm always having to be extroverted. Versus matching and honoring the person in front of me and allowing that person to feel comfortable knowing how I may come across to that type of person, and understanding and respecting how they want to be communicated with, which could mean I take my volume down, I take my tone and pitch down, I slow the conversation just a bit, and I allow for the pause to allow them to communicate and to feel more comfortable and to feel like they can respond back and I'm not pushing the conversation one way or another. This is a really subtle piece that I can't teach in 20 minutes today or in a short episode. But why I wanted to communicate this is specifically that type of person I just mentioned with my style, which is more direct and expressive, extroverted, is that, and that's just the behavioral style. Then the values behind it are what moves me. Like for example, of the 6 values, high theoretical, the love to learn, okay? Utility in resources, how I use resources. Do I value them or do I give them away? Or then there's the social interaction, like what motivates us either altruistically or very intentionally. Harmonics, or basically the environment we're in. Does it need to be in harmony, or does it need to be more objective? All right, what's more important? These are values, and we all have these 6 main values. Number 5 would be our individual goals. So whether it's individual towards commanding, in other words, self-interest and self-promotion, or more collaborative, which is more group or team and lower self in individual drive for your own recognition, but more collaboratively for the group's growth. And then lastly would be methods, or what we used to call traditional. So a traditional value. And this would lean into very structured, such as there is one way to do it, and this is the best way, and you teach everybody that this is the way. Or someone can have any range of values with this blend, by the way, but it could lean into the opposite, which is very low traditional value, meaning you don't need the structure, you don't need one way. There's many ways to go about it, but you might work on a system, and a system can allow multiple ways to do it. So these are just examples of the 6 values that are very unique to you, and you have your own blend of those along with the behavioral blend. So why I bring this up is when there's a lot of frustration in society right now, in this great awakening of people awakening to the massive corruption, number 1, the massive imbalance, which is in the political realm, the massive misinformation, disinformation, the one message that comes through our mainstream media in the news that's just constantly this message. So what if you knew that, and then there's behaviors, by the way. Let me backtrack just a bit. Behaviors that you see along the way, by the way. You see, such as, let's just look at mask wearing, okay? The behavior of mask wearing, past any realization that while there's information out there that completely confirms the ineffectiveness and actually the harm that they're doing by wearing them, we still see many patients wearing them. All right. Now, I'm clinically bringing this up because it's of importance when I see mankind knowing, as I research, because I have multiple sources of information, by the way, we all should. I do not watch the news for my emotion today, and I don't watch it for the news. I watch things that will help me think clearly, which will allow me to see the world through a perspective that is more in line with what's true, such as, why do I want to watch something that pharma is pushing down everyone's throat to train them how to act? I completely disagree. I can see through that clinically because I know the opposite. My point is the body is self-healing and self-regulating, and nobody's talking about that on the news. Why? Because no one's buying airtime for that. Pharma's buying drug time. Pharma's buying education, all the infiltration. My point is this. If you knew that 48% of the population was amiable, this is factual data on behavioral styles over years of research, right? And this number has grown over the last, since I started back in 1996 with understanding and becoming behaviorally certified through the DISC assessments and what's called TTI, Target Training International. But the point was this. If you knew that 48% of the population was amiable, the behavior style that goes with that is that they will do what they're told. That means it's not going to make sense to many of us. They're just going to do what they're told, and they're told on the news, they're told on the media, they're told in their programming that this is how you behave, and they behave that way. They don't even think of anything opposite because that's what they do. They're not going to have confrontation. They don't like challenges. Challenges, I mean confrontational challenges. They're going to avoid confrontation. They're going to slowly, methodically go about things, but they're very consistent. And when I say slowly, I don't mean like a turtle. I just mean they're going to be paced to the point where it's a good pace for them. They're going to go through life where they feel comfortable, they feel steady, they feel stable. And again, we all have some form of that amiability in our behavioral style. You may not know if it's your core behavior style, or it's a high, which is the next one, or if it's something third or fourth in the 4 behavioral blend styles. So when we know that, my message to these doctors was, if you knew that going in, why would you walk around frustrated with a chip on your shoulders and be angry and be resentful and just be disheartened, if nothing else, when people struggle with finding truth? Because we have to step back and look at what the mainstream propaganda is teaching. It's training people how to behave, while the CDC throws out basically ridiculous information that's fed through pharma that has an agenda and now can't be trusted. It's completely obvious. But again, I'm a complete whack job to people who place value on the CDC. I get it. The NIH. Interesting that the NIH funds literally, and this is all factual, they fund the granting of research, and if you don't play the game that they want you to play, you're not getting the research. Therefore, why would many researchers speak up? They don't, but there are around the world people speaking up about it. So this big battle between truth and fake news and fake science and pseudoscience is really just this incredible frustrational thing. Or you can step back and realize that behavioral styles are different and values are different. And even though someone still wants to do that behavior, such as wear a mask, it does fascinate me. That's true. It fascinates me. But I'm fascinated, not frustrated. And granted, when I'm tired, I could get frustrated. Like, oh my God, please. That's true because it happens. It certainly happens. Or I can catch myself and realize that, hey, I'm here for service. I'm serving. I'm here and I'm being asked to help this individual support and maintain health, either through relief care, through health care, through wellness care, through a preventive care, through advice, through answering a question, whatever it might be. And I get to choose how I participate. And I can love that individual through agape love, which is unconditional love for mankind. Okay, agape love, which is when I see that individual, I can judge them because they don't think like me or don't behave like me and they are stupid or that whatever, or I can understand and respect that they see the world differently. And it's not my place to judge them right or wrong. It's my role to show them how love emits through their body, how love is why we're here. And I don't have to say love. I can show love by honoring them right there where they're at. Granted, sometimes that's challenging, and we all will find ourselves on the short end of that many times. But why I'm sharing this is because when these doctors, I believe the value of the message is so important that if we can only deliver it one way, then we're only going to be limited to who can hear and see and learn that message. The message really is you're amazingly brilliant in terms of your body. For example, if it's a gentleman that comes in with chronic sciatic pain, he's been living it with it for 3 years or 15 years, and now he has shoulder and neck pain, and it's radiating out into the arms. He comes in for shoulder pain that's nagging, and then we find out in the case history, the context of the story, that he's been on an antacid for 25 years or 20 plus years, and we're seeing disc degeneration and we're seeing this chronic pain and this nerve inflammation as a result of many things. But my knowledge steps back and says, I'm going to meet him right here, what he's ready for, to then get him to the point he wants relief. I'm after relief. In the process, I'm correcting things that are upstream that are going to help the whole body, but I'm also focused on what he wants focused on, which is his goal, not mine, his. So this is an example of meeting the patient where they're at, meeting the person in your relationships where they're at, understanding they see the world through their lens, not as reality, but through their eyes. So he doesn't see the problem with the digestion in his discs, in his musculoskeletal system, and the inflammation that's going on in his body, and the lack of healing, why this is happening, and why it's gotten worse over time. But if I try to connect those dots right away, in other words, tell him what I know before I tell him how much I care, or show him how much I care, then my soft skill set is so hard that I can't lead the patient to where the patient really needs to be and wants to be. So back in training these docs over the weekend for how to communicate, the first step I had to do is teach them to get over the possibility that they weren't clear on who they were, that they weren't completely clear on their behavioral style, which means they were less aware of how they're being perceived. This is crucial. How are you being perceived? How is it that when you speak, when you interact with the people at work, with your relationships and your significant other, your kids, your family, any of those, how is it that you're communicating? All right. How is it that you're being received? Do people just not talk around you? Are they afraid of you? I mean, what is it? Do people dump problems on you because you're a sponge for, taking either people's energy and their challenges? So, or do you have to have all the details, every single answer? Do you research, strategically for so much time that nothing ever gets done, which is kind of what we refer to as analysis paralysis? Even though that's a great skill set, where does it become, a vice in your life rather than just a benefit? So, or a virtue. So we all have that balance in there, and being extroverted and being direct can be also a vice versus virtuous. It can be virtuous, and it just depends on the situation. It also depends on my awareness on how I apply my behavior, and then consciously be aware how others may be receiving it. Now, does that mean you have to change who you are? No, that means we adapt. Okay, there's a difference. Health is the optimal adaptation. We're adapting to our environment as the environment changes. And this is very, very challenging and stressful environment that's requiring all of us to be very adept and very adaptive. We can talk about the concept of understanding others, but my real message for you is, how do we reduce your stress by letting go of the expectations that someone has to think and see and feel and behave like you and have the same values or similar values? We can communicate, and I want to remind people, remind mankind, remind these listeners, you, that you are brilliant. So are the people in your life. They're different, but equal. Okay, this is the challenging thing in politics, is we have to see past the game that's been played to create divisiveness, to be distractive. Have your clan over here thinking this way with these values, and this clan over there thinking with their values. And what we're forgetting is we have different values, but we're still in this together. Okay? We don't have to think the same. But when one side, one party, one value system gets exercised, that's where there's an imbalance of power, and that's where there's destructive behaviors now being played on others. So if we can step back and realize that exists, but we don't have to be part of that game, so you can enjoy your life, so you can have happiness, be fulfilled, and less stress throughout your day is what I'm truly after, and more of your brilliance would be respect the fact that you're different than someone else, but we are more alike than different. Your values can be different, and I can still love and appreciate you for who you are. This individual that I was talking about with the pain pattern of sciatica and the digestive problem with the antacids, and yet not seeing the connection with the inflammation in the body, we are now in the second phase to third phase of care where we're addressing that, and the results are getting bigger and bigger, more and more days of relief and complete relief. So what I'm excited about that is that this patient had the ability to hear the message when the message was ready to be presented to him based on his readiness and my patience, which is quite funny in the grand scheme, because I'm not that patient of a person. But I've had to train and learn the soft skills and develop that skill set with patience because I was ready to go. I was fired up and ready to help them. And I can see as a projector how their best self is. I mean, I can see them where they come in and I go, I already see you here, way up here where you're like doing awesome, healed, expressing, interacting in the world, reaching your potential. I can see that. And I know how to get them there. But they're not ready for that. They're ready for, can I just feel better and maybe sleep through the night? That's the vision. So that's when the provider who really, or the leader, the mentor, the influencer has to understand, or can learn to understand and respect, meeting our the person in front of us where they're at and allowing them to still be themselves. It doesn't mean he's fully himself right now. He's not. He's expressing himself through this distorted pain pattern in this lack of normal health or health, period. So I realize it's not truly him yet. But over time, he's going to be expressing himself more and more, which he has, and he's literally coming out of a shell, and he's feeling better, and his relationships are now better because he's feeling better, sleeping better. He feels like he's on a path of improvement, not a path of decline and destruction and getting worse. So we're literally meeting a different human being as we go. It's kind of crazy, but it's real. So that's why when I first meet someone in my office, it doesn't mean that's who they are. They're right now in a situation where they're in pain. They're struggling. They're not truly themselves. So I don't tag anything to that. I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry you're so distorted in this position that I got to do everything I can to help you see the true you, the true you and the true person in the patient. Okay? So that's what we were teaching this weekend. We're teaching docs, first of all, can you be aware that this is how you behave and this is how you might be perceived by this type, this type, this type, and that type. And when we go into DISC, it's easy, and many of you have already heard of this or might have had an assessment one day. And you might just discard it like, oh, DISC, I know that, boom, throw it over here. Like you're done with it already. And what I found this weekend is the reason I was asked to speak on it is because I've literally studied this for, 28 years, 26 to 27 years. So the application of I do not hire any staff without an assessment because I need to know their behavioral style and if it's right for the position because we know what the position holds. Before bringing any doctor onto our team, would need to see an assessment as well to know behavioral styles, to know motivators, how to motivate them, how to honor their motivations, how to support them, and then also how to teach that doc or my staff how to have their needs met outside of the office. For example, I can't come into work and have my needs met. That may sound silly and funny for some of you, like, what's the point? I mean, well, why couldn't you? Well, the point is to have our needs met outside of the business or the office so that we can serve the patient's goals, not our own. Well, isn't what I do fulfilling? Yeah, it is. But it's not the need. It's not my major needs. My needs are met outside the office so that when I come into the office, it is free to serve the agenda and the goals of the patient. The business needs to succeed, but that's why we set up systems so it can. And then we allow patients to flow in and out of our office. And when that happens, we honor, in my staff, my whole team, we train on what DISC and motivators are because I also want them to respect the person in front of them for the differences they have and the similarities we all have. Like, we're all similar, more similar than different. And that can be stated in many ways, which we could get to in another episode and demonstrate some of that. But the first awareness here would be, and I thought this was important to share with all of you, because we can all learn to reevaluate our relationships and then look first at how we might being perceived, how we're being perceived, as well as the lens we're seeing things through. So I know that if I have viewpoints, in holistic health or natural health and am not a big fan of pharma, then I know that I'm everyone else doesn't think like me, and that's okay. Perfect. Not is it only okay, it doesn't have to be okay with me. It's just my life goes better when I realize I don't control it, and that just is. So if I knew, again, that 48% of the population was just going to do whatever they see or told through propaganda and what they're told and what's spread throughout the media, then I'm not frustrated. I might be frustrated that it happens because that the media does this and that there's political agendas going through it, but I'm not surprised. I still feel like I have a role in supporting the people that are ready to listen and awake and want help, but they can do it on their own time. Like it's okay. I'm fine. And that's part of the relationship building is establish trust by allowing them to be who they are. Establish trust by loving them as is, whether they change or not. I don't need them to change. Get it? Do you need the people in your life to change? Or can you change you and allow them to be them? And they may change by feeling supported that they can do that versus resisted that they're being pushed to change, just like my patients. So I hope the docs that we talked with, and it sounded like they had some great takeaways, and they were excited to apply the DISC knowledge and motivators into their first of all, with their teams, so they become better communicators, more cohesive, and they're a tighter, more functional group to deliver their services and help more people. But I see my vision also being met by helping chiropractors become better communicators in their community. So if I communicated one way, you could just see this, and there's 4 different main types of behaviors out there, and they're all a blend, by the way. So now there's many more than 4, but there's 4 like distinct high cores and highs. And we can get into more of that on some other time. But the moral of the story here is we're different and equal. Different and equal. And we are more similar than we are different. Okay? So we're unique in our abilities to see the world and process information and the values we have based on our experiences in life. Because, in other words, we didn't just grab them for nothing. We found ways to adapt to life and grow. And then that's how we've developed those skill sets that lens through our lives. And by the way, these can change with traumas, with major upheavals in our lives. So with major life changes, our values absolutely can change, such as mine did. But my point is this. As we go through life, if we can honor that all those different styles receive communication differently, pace, pitch, tone, volume, not just the words we use, then knowing with a soft skill set, can come into that communication, ask the patient questions in the way in the communication that they behave, they like to be communicated with, talk to them in their language, not mine, theirs, which doesn't cost me anything in terms of energy or ego or my self-esteem. Actually, it builds it because I just recognized the uniqueness of this person in front of me, and I care so much about their receiving of a message, or at least their improvement. How's that? That they get better, they get their goals met, they find a way for client fulfillment. Is that I'm going to communicate it in a way that they go, oh my gosh, thanks, that's so easy. I can do that. That's great. Let's go. Or, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. Why didn't my doctor tell me this? I knew there was something going on in here. It increases the ability to serve others. It expands our consciousness to allow others to be themselves, to not judge, to not carry garbage with us all day, to not hold it against people, and to love them as they are, regardless of what they do or change their behavior. You can say no, you don't want to help somebody, by the way. This doesn't mean you just bend over and haphazardly just, oh, I'm supposed to bend over and, serve you and while you walk all over me. No, that's not it. There's a nuance to the communication. What I'm really stating is, first and foremost, do you know your DISC style, how you behave? Are you extroverted or introverted? Are you task-oriented or people-oriented? And if you can nail down two of those, extrovert and people, then we know how to communicate with you. Task and introvert, I know how to communicate with you. If you're extrovert, and people, I know how to communicate. If you're introvert and people, I know how to communicate. If you're extrovert and task, again, we know how to communicate. So This flexibility, this adaptive flexibility, expands your ability to impact your environment, your world, your community, because you have a soft skill set that honors the person in front of you. And it customizes a message. Do you see that? And it's adept, it's fluid, it's dynamic, it's a higher vibration. It's all these things that can allow you to really have an impact in your community. And you, specifically, you don't have to be a doctor. I mean, the fact that you are listening to this and can apply it, think about your relationship, first of all, with yourself. Less frustration, less anger, less emotional harboring, less baggage you're carrying around every day, more love, more smiling, easier, more relaxed, not having to change other people, not being pissed that they don't think the way you do, not being pissed at your neighbor because, everything they do is shrinking in life or contracted while you're trying to expand and you just don't see eye to eye, or you have to tag team with this neighbor because the other one. I'm just saying, let go of the divisiveness and embody the variation, the difference, the natural dynamics in life. We become this social media tag where if you post and say these things, you start to ignore that person because they're not saying things you agree with. And before social media, none of that mattered because it wasn't being posted every day in front of your face. So, I mean, when you look and if you're living through social media, let go of that. I mean, it doesn't mean go be a dinosaur. I'm just saying, how much value are you placing on others? Are you selling or pushing an agenda? Are you pushing a viewpoint? Or can you just allow others to have their viewpoints and get that they're different than yours, and not separate yourself from them because they're different, but allow that cool nuance, to be fascinated with their behavior, their style, their values, instead of being frustrated. That's all I'm trying to do, is free up the reality of data that says 48% of the population will just do what they're told. And values are different. Some people give away their time and have no problem doing it. They're high social value. Others are very utility. In other words, they want remuneration for their time, effort, or they want fulfillment, or they want productivity. Some really need to learn to apply things, and others are just going to be intuitive. It's very different. We don't have to disrespect the style that they have. We just got to, wow, there's one of the, that's fascinating. So anyway, I hope this was helpful. It was just to get your feet wet, kind of toes dipping into behavioral styles and then value motivators. But I wanted to share the value of that in your life today, where you and your family can look at, by the way, if you want to do assessments, you can contact my office, AnonsonChiropractic@gmail.com, and we will look at the possibility of finding a way to get some assessments for you. It can be a foundation to understanding. It is a foundation to understanding yourself. But bottom line is, when you understand yourself, you can understand others. And if you can understand others, this world's going to be a better place, because there'll be less judgment, more communication, and better flexibility and adaptation with styles. That means honoring, again, that person in front of you. God bless. Peace and love. Until next time, have a great day. Ciao. Okay, my fellow health warriors, it's time to head over to iTunes, franklyspeakingdrwade.com. There, you can rate, review, and subscribe, as well as share, so more of our brothers and sisters can grow to realize their voice and their health freedom. Speaking up means you matter, so get on it. This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements or views expressed are not medical advice and are not meant to replace the advice of your medical doctor. This podcast, including Dr. Wade Anonson and his guests, disclaim responsibility for any adverse effects you may experience from the specific use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse and accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about the guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements and advertisements for such services or products. Individuals on this podcast may have direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical condition, consult your licensed physician.